So I'm going to start taking a couple questions here, and I did actually have one in the chat box that I saw. And that question was in regards to how do letters and numbers play in the ancient languages, because it seems like there's only an introspection here of the English language. And that's a very good point, because it actually occurs in all languages. And the language is numbers, okay? In That's the first code, that's the first program. And so, because if you're trading with someone else in another village or in another place, or you're trying to communicate with someone, generally the first thing and the most primary thing you need to do is to be able to make some kind of exchange. And to exchange, even if it's just cow, like you got to imagine that just this village and, linking up with this other village, and they don't even speak the same language, they don't speak the same tongue maybe, but he says, hey, I need 10. And so he's going to hold up some fingers, and there's going to start being words that denote the number of how many that are going to be achieved. And this is also how many are going to be gotten. And this is also very important to understand, that the limitation of what even having the whole 10 finger thing would be about, because this not 20 fingers, not 30 fingers, not 2 fingers. You see what I mean? So it would say that this is how many you get. And it's just one of those deeper introspections that you say, well, how many was I given a function? You were given 10. Okay, so right from that point, you're going to think in this 10 state of mind that's basically 5 against 5. And then 5 against 5 are fighting each other. And then this becomes how you're dividing things based by 10. And this is why also most currency has a base decimal or of 10. So this is, it's a deeper thing that you can look into and start getting the codes. But as far as how it works also with ancient languages, this is what gets into who is defining the tarot. Because, for instance, if you look at the number 0, it means cipher. It comes from the word sefer, which is Arabic. And then from there it moves on to the word Zephyrus, which is Greek. And then it keeps going from there. And then it has its terminology as being a cipher. And then it changes its terminology to being a west wind. So this is why there's new tarots that are released, because the tarot in one deck, let's say there's 72 cards, so that's Shimham Faresh, that's the Setian system. Then in another deck, there may be 52 cards. 52 cards come out, that's the American system in a tense. So, or the Norse system, excuse me. So what happens is that this is called reinventing the wheel. And then a person who attempts to reinvent the wheel obviously creates time, because the sequences are off. So that's why I say don't reinvent the wheel, because once the person then tampers with the general positions of how time is supposed to work, how development is supposed to work, then time comes into existence. And this leads me to another thing, which is why every culture is supposedly responsible for discovering the 0. Like they always say, well, the Mayans discovered the 0. The Egyptians discovered the 0. They will always say that in these documentaries, and it's because the moment that any of these cultures discovered the 0 as what it really is, or the cipher, once they've discovered that, they actually discovered death. They discovered the Omega. And this is why there was a lot of cults that were here on the planets that were cults of death. Now, this cult of death is, again, neither good nor bad. Obviously, the new cults of death that you're looking at now are nothing like what the cult of death meant in history. Because in deep history, it was to complete the final process of the transmutation. Birth, sustaining death. Birth, sustaining death. Birth, sustaining death. That's called a trimurti. Then once you can trimurt, then you can become a dynamo, like a sun. And then from that point, you have a generator going on. So this knowledge was like about how to complete. So when someone said, well, I want to go to Earth, and they said, man, you sure you ready for that course? What's down there, man? Nothing but diamonds. Those are diamond courses. And you probably see this huge grid of all these different diamond courses that need to be achieved in order for one to become beyond geometry. You see what I mean? So we have to become innovative. And this is the other thing about, and I want to say this before we start taking calls, that I want to tell people about to create something that is different and new. You also have to realize, and even I'm coming to more of a maturity on telling people what they cannot do. Like if it comes out of your mouth, especially as a person that's Clearface, if it comes out of your mouth that you tell a person that they cannot do something, you're now introducing limitations. Now they've tricked you into judging so that you can go ahead and issue an edict or decree, mandamus, of a judgment on someone. And you got to realize that that action is a corrupted Jupiterian chosen one program that has been running. And meaning that, notice how there's always, when you deal with these texts, there's always a judge, okay? There's always a jury, meaning they get 12 people in the jury, I believe it is. And I guess that's symbolic with the zodiac, right? And then they get them to judge you and make judgments and pass judgments and this kind of behavior. And there's tons of words, judicial, all this connects into a particular group of us who are into this chosen concept, and that their role is to judge the rest of this earth, especially to judge it not fitting and not right, like the discouragers. They become accusers. And many people who read into this, they know exactly what I'm talking about. But we have people on the planet that are accusing other human beings and accusing other systems for just not even being the right color and not being in the right place. And if we really want to do something about this, and this is why I said the end of the illusion, you must let Clearface and Vastface merge. You must be equipped and understand what is going on in this reality by just understanding the template. It makes everything simple from there. You just mesh it over anything. It doesn't just work for only spirituality, is what I was saying. This is something that everyone needs in dynamics of their life, because it will create a greater individual and being within themselves, still realizing that we're all always connected. So just as, and the reason why I also don't want to be the dictator of telling someone what they can and cannot believe in is because it gets a stagnancy going on in regards to, and there's a key thing here, and I just need to catch it because there's massive transition going on about why you don't want to get involved in this. And I'll come back into it in a minute, but I have a lot of stuff that's really been going on with a lot of different energies from different people that are involved in different factions. And what's happened even to me now is that I can still see the whole thing very clearly about what are the processes that need to take place in order for expansion to take place, because I ran through those trials with them myself. And then I also seen where once you receive and get to that stage, then nothing can touch you. Everything is you. So anything that is coming at you, you can actually become it and head it off and turn it around and convince it not to. It becomes an entirely different wide dynamic. Okay, so this is what I was saying. If I introduce then telling someone what they cannot do, then that means they can look at whatever I'm doing and tell others, oh, you should not do that. Right? So this is with every action, there's a reaction. I just had to capture this, but for every action, there's a reaction. So if I say you shouldn't become a Christian, then this gives Christians the right to say, hey, you shouldn't become a Clearface. Like, we don't even know. They don't even have a name with their faction. It's like Astral, like Realm Dynamics, and then they said they're nothing, and then they said they're everything, and then I guess they actually said that there's a limitation within the verbiage of the conversation, so they don't even really want to talk. They seem to be communicating on an entirely different level, and everyone's in synchronistic with each other on this positive vibration, and they're calling themselves the bridge. And then if a person can actually comprehend that, they sit back on the bed with that and be like, shit, that's what I wanted to do. And I need to let me get involved. So what I'm saying is that to come at someone with some kind of conflict, because we can see this from integers now, like, okay, a reaction. If I just tell them you can't be a Christian, the Christian's going to tell everyone else that they can't be a part of this. So instead of me doing that, I'll just emancipate from the entire thing and tell everyone, look, or expand. Somebody did break down emancipation the other day, but expand, get out, blow up, whatever you want to call it, implode, beyond the whole thing and say, okay, well, look, let me ask you something. What around you right now, beside the real elements like air, and even that's changing, water, and even that's changing, is not the objects around you changing? Some are being upgraded and some are being degraded. The water coming out of the tap is not the same as it used to be when you pulled it out of the river. So some things are upgrading, some things are degrading. And I'm in a planet, and I can see that. Okay, so somebody has a question here, and I'm going to first take questions in the chat box, and I'm going to allow some calls because we're using somewhat of a new system. Question says, are there still 24 hours in a day? My home clocks and cars and clocks and radios is not synonymous of what is being broadcasted. Okay. Well, I can't actually confirm that phenomena of everyone's clocks changing and what caused it to be 24 hours in a day, because there's different clocks. There's analog clocks and there's digital clocks that are recording this precession. But there's something very simple with clocks, and that's whether it's analog or it's digital. And you can see this on the Wikipedia when they explain the digital clock or the electronic watch, that the pulses are the same. So within the regular clock, there's cogs there, and those cogs are moving at certain pulses. And in an electric watch, there are actually transistors that are giving off those pulses. So we're recording time through pulses, not really through these objects and things around. So I would suggest that the pulses are tied into our frequency more than they're actually tied into these devices. These devices will be responding on the frequency. So I think in many cases that you get environments that are moving exceptionally fast, such as our environment seems to be moving exceptionally fast, while others seem to be saying that they're reporting that time is lengthening for them. So those who tend to be expanding in their consciousness have a tendency to record that time seems to be moving a lot faster for them. And while those who are not even aware of time and just are in the moment with themselves and their immediate gratification. So that's what I'll say on that. The next question here is, who is Clearface? Who is Blindface? Okay, well, Blindface I'm not sure, but remember what we're doing is, because anytime we speak, we start to shape, form, and fashion or mark something. So in a certain sense, Clearface and Vastface are simple integers to record the limited and the limitless side of ourselves. And obviously Clearface takes up the role as limitless, a being that has actually gone to an expanded state of realizing that all is self. And then all of the whole realization thing and all the data that is tied into realizations and how you came to that is then wiped, where the person is basically, or the being is seated within themselves. They are not looking to get something or receive something. They don't feel like there's a rush on something and that there's time running out and all that because of their accomplishments. And mind you, both of these are far aspects of ourselves. I wouldn't say that everyone starts off Clearface and everyone starts off Vastface, because Vastface obviously takes an individual to amass a great deal of data about what has been going on in the physical world, and to a point where they come up with some kind of template, and then every single thing that they start to interact with, they begin to be able to log and categorize it properly so that it makes sense that however these physical realities are being developed, they're being done with a specific system, and that system does not deviate. Okay, that's Vastface. Clearface, again, which is the stage of no senses ultimately. It means that Clearface can actually, if you want to call it comprehending, it can comprehend the unbegotten. It can comprehend the spaces where we didn't use eyes, nose, ears, mouth, any of the five senses or anything that we have as to interact, digitalia, as we know it, as the extensions of our being in order to comprehend. It was already within. That's Clearface, and so that's the best way to explain that. Okay, so it looks like we may be getting into now some calls, so let me go ahead and log in. Okay, somebody is asking still, excuse me, I'm scrolling down, who do I think YHWH actually is? Now, in the Brahmic tradition, what you'll notice is that there are monasteries where there is a constant chanting going on of specific vibrations. And then what then exists on that vibration is an actual form, i.e. an eidolon, that has a massive level of data. And that's why this was, in a sense, I think it was the Egyptian more than Kemetan state. It was really more a Setian stage, because it creates per se a ghost in the machine. It creates almost like a digital character in a sense, or a Tron in a world. And this is why YHVH is Tron. It is an actual throne of some sort that can interact, especially through electricity, as a L works with electricity, it can somehow go into different parts of this reality and has connections with different parts of this reality. And what YHVH seems to be synonymous for was a gate into those pyramidic traditions of monotheism, and or i.e. the first stage on a ladder. But it also seems that because this image does bear a cone and somewhat of the shape of man, it seems like an ultimate play to pin man and woman against themselves through doctrine. Meaning that ultimately when you understand completely who the characters are in the Bible, you realize that it is man who is God and the devil. Okay, meaning that the human beings, man and female, are actually playing the roles of God and the devil. And so when you can look at it from that perspective, you realize that the entire doctrine is designed to turn us all against each other. And that's why the only last piece of it is a jury and a judge, someone to actually accuse you. And this is why in the Egyptian systems and when the whole Osirian traditions began, those traditions encompass that kind of judgment and this kind of weighing and these kind of things. It's obviously for the ancestors, the best idea was to keep educating and to keep instructing through experiences. And so experiences were continuously rolled out. And if what you can call, just like I reframed what people's ideas of karma to me is more of reaction. So instead of trying to look forward in times into something too deep, you should see it as everything that you do is going to have a result to it. So you can turn it into working in your favor. And I guess they call that dharma. But it's interesting to deal with some of the topics and to do that from a more clear mind, because then you realize that when you're playing ping pong with the whole thing, meaning you keep asking yourself questions to already get back to the same conclusion of that you had before, which was that you are everything. Now you just have to fill yourself. The actual organism itself needs to be rejuvenated. And then the work is, because of what you've done, you're always encased in what you've done. So every action that you make against your body, you're either eat it or you have it around you and it's acting on you. Right? And so this is what's perpetually holding the frequency. This stuff is not as mystical it's mystical when you don't know about it. Then it's not as mystical when someone comes and tells you about it and dissipates all the mist. And then you start looking around, you say, well, the synonymous to everything that I am is around me. So all I got to do is start changing what's going on around me and what I'm eating and what I'm putting in my system. And then that's going to start getting me the results that I'm actually looking for. Then this whole data, this whole Setian level of approaching things just through getting information will go away and my actions will begin. Meaning that I first start building the ship, getting that thing back together. Then when it lifts up, it comes to a harmonic, then people are going to bump into you everywhere. It's going to be like, that's how it works. It's attraction. So what happens is that you find these individuals that are on the same frequency as you are, or also aspiring to go beyond in the same frequency in the direction that you're going, and this becomes how your new environment is developed. But it's still it's on you, because that's why individuals who have not done that work and then force their way or try to get into an environment in which there's individuals who have done that work, there becomes a conflict within those environments, and it's not long before that individual is removed from that environment. So this means just as that individual, because I've been that individual before, I've been removed from different environments, whatever the case may be, learn how to harmonize with what it is that you say that you want to be around or what decision you want to make. Don't just think. Don't think it. Don't be a Setian, just scientifically thinking about what it would be like, and then going around the people that are like that, and then imagining if you haven't become that, you're going to find something harmonic with them, because that's not what you're going to find. And so this is also how we have the ability to, I call it in a sense, being adept in being adult, because this allows us to see what the action and the reaction is for better or for worse. If I make this decision, this is what's going to happen. So this is how I begin to negotiate even with myself, and understanding that the limitations of this body can be unpinned if I can get into some kind of agreement with the beings that exist within me. And me and Jason were also talking about this on a deep level, about the beings that exist within you, even from a chemical level. Like when you've been eating, or your mom has been eating some kind of animal or fish deposit, and then that has in turn been eaten by another organism or enzyme in your body, and then this becomes like this strip eventually in your muscle. And so now you actually are one with this fish. And this is something that over lifetimes, or even in this lifetime specifically, that you may find the body itself being completely comprised of multiple organisms, and then wondering, well, why am I so confused? And this is why the quest and the work starts with all the stuff that you have done up until this point is in the body. So when you go at the body, that's when you start, if there's a thing is called karma, which is basically the reaction of what you did to your body, you can start removing the karma, or basically karma is a dark cloud of toxin. And so to remove that vapor from the body, then you can use the methods that have been taught on the show and that if people have been giving out. If there's any real knowledge that's around here, that's the knowledge that you need to be latching onto and being able to understand, or understand as we call it, because that's the one that is most integral to giving you the results. Like we said before, the difference between learning it versus experiencing it. Okay, so let's take some calls. Sir, you can go ahead and introduce yourself and then start asking your questions, and I'll just adjust that as we go.
Yeah, well, my name is Willis, and I'm just calling from Louisiana, Shreveport, Louisiana.
Okay.
And basically, I just have, you've been talking about Vastface and Clearface. So will Vastface be done?
Will Vastface be done?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So remember what we were saying about the denotation between the number of Clearface and Vastface, which we can get into, which is either a 1 or a 0, right? So if you were trying to determine which one is a 1 or a 0, that's when you get to the point of realizing the connection between the two characters. And this is because notice how the number 1 is, if you saw it on a 3-dimensional level, is actually a tube. Okay, can you visualize that for me? You see that the number 1, as you're looking at it written down on a piece of paper, if you made that 3-dimensional, meaning you took it one more dimension up, it would blow up. It would have to blow out, and that would make it a tube. And then when you take that tube and you look down the face of that tube, meaning right into that tube, you'll see a 0 there. That 0 will be the edges of the tube. So this means that the symbol 1, when you finally get to the point of realization, symbolizes also the symbol 0 in conjunction with one another, like, and not as separate. This means that there's no beginning and there's no end for this kind of being. While the Tin Man, let me finish explaining. While the Tin Man, which has also a lot to do with these traditions of the Brahmanism, the Judaistic traditions, etc. You deal with a world that is built on this division, and this division is when 1 and 0 are written separately. Okay, because now if you look at a piece of paper, you look at, well, what is 10? It's a 1 written and a 0 written, as if they are separate from each other. And so it really gets deep into programming and also deprogramming, if you wanted to see the core symbols that are related to consciousness.
Okay, so it's the same thing as saying the physical plane will always exist in the mind.
For sure, it's like trying to figure out who created who, the supreme being, or excuse me, the God, or the person with the idea of God, like which one came first. And so this kind of thing, again, as long as there's people who are thinking in the memories, okay, because this is also where the MEs, it gets really deep in there too with memories. Because what the MEs were, any kind of knowledge would have to be the memory of something who has accomplished that knowledge, right? Like somebody has to record something and then write something down or whatever, and then that should be able to be translated to another person, right? And so when a person says, okay, I'm going to show you how to make a light bulb, I'm going to write to you how to do that, they're really writing their memory of how they made that light bulb, okay? So these memories are really what we're dealing with here, and what's at stake here to what kind of realities that we're capable of getting into and which ones we're not. And that's this whole thing about projection, that if you've seen a place one time, it's generally very easy to project your way to it, versus if you've never seen this place before, how would you even know where it is? And this is what it also leads into what we're talking about today about your name. If you'll never repeat the same tone and vibration ever again, then who really are you? You see what I mean? It's like this gets you to that borderline. This is the Clearface, Vastface borderline, because you realize, well, wait a minute, this is all a game. This is the alpha and omega game. This is the beginning, then the middle, kind of what happens, and then the end. And where I'm at is somewhere in between this timeline between 1 and 0. And what I need to do is I need to collapse this consciousness. And this is what happens when you finally get to the last, if you're going in the Vastface direction, trying to learn a lot of knowledge and data, you get all your what's, whens, whys, wheres, who, all those questions answered, and to a point where you reach the point. It's like your brain runs on this infinite wheel. It's like if a kid starts asking you, and then what? And then what happened? And then what happened? You and this kid could go on for aeons, and you would be able to keep explaining to that kid the process of life through multiple things. But there would be something, if you could do that you will realize that it was circular, that everything that you were explaining has its heyday, it has its height, and then it has its demon. It has its demonization point, meaning that you had this point. You could have this point in your life where everyone thinks it's great, and you're having this great time, and then you can have these low points, right? And so this is all part of physical realities. So if we go and judging any of these characters at different stages, especially if we're now seeing them externals and not metaphors for what's going on inside of us, we start judging these characters externally. This begins to create, because maybe this is more the key to your question, how many more unbalanced worlds will be created? Because that's a big key, because there are balanced worlds. If you look at the world and how it can sustain itself, you can see already that balance can be achieved. So it's just what vehicle, and this is a deep thing. It's even bringing me to something. If we're using, let's say, even the animal vehicle or even the human body in our experience with the planet, that is going to cause some grief onto the planet. Versus if you're just using your ethereal body to interact with the planet, then you see what I mean? You're working on a more subtle level. This is like the same way that you may come at another individual. If you're using your more dense, callous side versus your more soft, ethereal side, then there's going to be a different response that you're going to get from the organism. So you can really get into just seeing yourself in this reality as first these two characters that seem to be diametrically opposed to one another, Clearface versus Vastface. And then your next step is to merge these two characters, to realize that I can even actually think about what it's like to be fully expanded, even though such things cannot even be summed up in thought. You have to experience that. And then that's where the connection goes, because then you say, well, wait a minute, I must have already experienced that then. And so what you're really looking at around you then is just confirmations. Like that's most people are, not just you, me, everyone else is in need of just confirmations at times that, hey, am I really that? Are you really sure? I mean, you got some data on this? I'm willing to go with you on this, but do you have some proof? And in this proof, it becomes us. We can lay ourselves down now. And this is what creating this new platform is really about in regards to getting others involved in open source, sharing the building of the knowledge of what we are. Like some people have excessive knowledge in one area and in nothing else. And that knowledge is it's like 20, 30 years into, let me show you exactly how this wheel works. Let me show you exactly how this homeopathy works. And then what you'll start seeing, because you won't get what you would think is like a chaos, you've got information going everywhere. That's not what you would get. You would, after a while, start seeing a pattern. And then everything you start seeing coming across this portal, you would be able to connect. Well, that goes there. It would sort itself. And this is how we would literally use the experience that we're having in life to tell us what experience we're going to have next. This then is the brink of creating Earth in this tense of being a time machine. It's just what another individual I was talking to As we talk about the stronger mind, the mind that can envelop all other ideas and say, oh yeah, in this next world, you'll be able to do that too, don't worry. And enveloping all of that, this is when you get to all of that. You know, this is where you get to, you know, what it takes to turn Earth into a time machine. And, you know, it's not such as a far concept, and it's actually where I believe that we're headed anyway. So, if you do have any more questions, I can answer those questions.
But no, that was it.
All right, brother. Well, I do
Thank you.
I appreciate you calling in and inspiring that message. We'll talk soon.
All right.
Okay. Okay, so that brings us to something. Okay, when people are saying, well, what do you mean the strongest mind wins? And maybe you're using the wrong word. And I'm only saying the strongest mind because there's a certain just statement like, well, the strongest mind wins, okay? And that only can evoke at this point the type of energy that I'm talking about when you say, okay, I'm going to go beyond just even the person who thinks they got it all figured out for the next 50 years and what they think is going to happen. It's like, oh, yeah, well, you know, we're going to, like the Georgia Guidestones, it has this weird projection. These other people, they have these weird projections. And none of this stuff is based on, most of the time, spiritual consciousness and the real tuning into the planet and understanding the harmonics and this kind of knowledge. The stuff that me and you are talking about today on this show, our leaders should know some of this stuff, right? Enough of it. There should be a course for them. So that way, everything they develop in this harmonics that speeds up everything, right? But we're not there yet. So this is about how to exactly get there. And let's take some calls because I'm not going to get on the pedestal here, but I want to explain some stuff in a moment. But I'm going to take area code 901. You are on Astral Quest Wholeness.
Wholeness, Sevan. How are you, sir?
Oh, man, I'm doing pretty good over here. I'm actually just trying to keep my warp drive together. It seems to want to go critical.
Okay.
No,
let it go on then, brother.
I don't know, man. I could get messy for the electronics around here.
Okay. Well, I got a couple of questions for you, Sevan. Let's see. So I used to be a professional wrestler. I have a degenerated cartilage in my hip, in my SI joint. I'm doing some tonics to start off my day with about 32 ounces of structured water with Himalayan crystal salt. Second tonic, I'll do another 32 ounces of structured water with turmeric, ginger, lemon, and cayenne. The third one, I'll do 32 ounces of structured water with chlorella. And then I'll finish up with 32 ounces of Shivajit. And that's other than obviously not putting any other toxins in my body, I might be able to do to expedite something like that. And also, I don't know if I missed it. I've watched a lot of your stuff, listened to it, pretty much every one of your lectures on Reverb and everywhere I can find you. And I haven't heard you mention a whole lot in relation to parasites. So could you touch on those two for me?
For sure. First of all, I just need to confirm that you can actually hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, because I did have a brief interruption in the sound, and that kind of didn't allow me to hear your first question properly. But I will address the second question in regards to parasites, and then you can explain to me what that first question is.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it just depends on how you want to look at this, and this is what I was explaining about the triangulation, either mentally, spiritually, or physically. How do you want to look at the parasite situation? And this will allow you in a sense to triangulate it, meaning to understand from multiple levels where this parasite is coming from. So that way it doesn't just retreat to one corner or one oob and then pop up again somewhere else. And this is synonymous with sometimes you think you've completely rid yourself of a situation and then it pops up again or inflames itself again. Okay? And so are you clear of what I'm saying about suppressing certain, let's say, for instance, there's a physical ailment, but there's always some kind of spiritual attachment to it. And then so if you suppress, let's say, the physical side, but you don't handle the mental side, then it can pop back up in the mental side.
Okay, so give me an example of how I would address physical parasites on a spiritual side.
Okay, so Okay, so on the spiritual side, all right, I'm sorry. I'm thinking, okay, on the spiritual side, now, if you notice that the geometry that are tied into the parasites are actually related to, excuse me, I need to collect myself here for a second, but
Yeah.
basically the geometry that you're looking at that are related to viruses are set up like generators themselves, almost like small miners, okay? And so there's this connection with parasites and the full moon in regards to their reproduction phase. But the parasites are always programmed in a tense with the basic state of consciousness, which is survive. So what you're dealing with then is that the parasite itself is actually some type of fertilizer, meaning some type of bacteria in itself. And that it's just not harmonic with the body because the body has reached into another frequency stage. And that's why the frequency in most people lowers when they get sick. And so if you wanted to deal with it on the spiritual phase, what you would have to deal with is astral hygiene. And what this is that you can use things like silver, which is, colloidal silver, and sterilized silver. I believe it's, this is basically where you have, and you can find this device. Just one moment for me. Let me just see if I can grab this data. But you can find this device, and it's for making your own colloidal silver, okay? And the reason why you want to, get something like this is because you can, instead of, you're going to need a lot of silver is what I'm saying. And then what you can do is you can start putting this in spray bottles and in things and beginning to, in a tense, work corner to corner inside of your house. And I'm just, as I'm talking to you, I'm just working on visualizing the situation as it really is. But what really happens is that we can accumulate a lot of what is synonymous with the parasites inside of our own environment. And then when we go over that environment with something like any kind of ultraviolet or any kind of silver, it can remove that. And this is why things like another much more effective method if you wanted to work with the body, because I'm still kind of a little bit hazy because I need to kind of understand directly what kind of parasites we're dealing with to be able to answer the questions correctly. But when you work on it just from the physical body, you can take yourself to these places that are like thermals. And what they are is, well, I only know that some of them here in Costa Rica, but what they are is where the ground is still open from a volcanic reaction. And in some of these places, they build these sweat lodges right over the top of these open areas. And so some of the vapors from these type of places can go up into the sweat lodge and actually go across the body. And what I found is that this is very effective for removing parasites, because what parasites actually are is a collective frequency of one specific being. Like if you just take frequency, just like Candida, and you just saw the Candida frequency, you would see a large worm rather than just one small worm. So when you get them inside of you, then they start to multiply and this frequency gets stronger. And as it gets stronger, it's like a tone. And that's why if you start listening to your own vibration, like we were talking about earlier in the conversation, you can actually map when there's a fluctuation in the tone, and that be also synonymous with maybe you just got sick or maybe you just got a lot of energy. And so you can see, even pinpointing in yourself through this tone, where you can remove certain disharmonic tones. And so what really happens though is that this Candida begins to multiply and begins to send its frequency, which is basically a basic command. I need to survive. So that sends a signal to the brain, and the brain says, well, I need to produce this candy, I need to produce this yeast, and et cetera.
That's the cravings, and send that message to your brain that you got the cravings in.
For sure. And then imagine then, now that's just Candida. So when you're talking about a virus is in a sense attacking the mind. It could be attacking several different parts of the consciousness. And this is why we need to look at this. And I'll turn my camera on here because I noticed it was off. But what we need to look at is that we are actually already infected in many stages. What is going on is that it's just very difficult to run the being down. And so where you're at is about 1/1000th of your strength, 1/8 billionth, something like that. And so
Right.
when you start basically going at this at your body and start changing up the frequencies and start realizing exactly kind of how that's going on in you, then that's when you stop becoming 1/8 billionth. If I'm explaining this properly, you actually start to, it's a process, but you start to then become more harmonic with a certain group, right? And then now you make up another frequency, a larger group. And then pretty soon you're working your way back to where everything is emitted from, which is really yourself. And so this is the process. And as inside of you, all of the conflict in it. So if you really want to understand what also the parasites are, and this is good, it's just taking me a minute to pull it in. It's the conflicted state of consciousness that's actually distorted, because when you look at most of the parasites, okay, and this kind of gets into something I'm just trying to stay out of because I don't want to get into the moon and I don't want to get into the creations of these microorganisms, but there's clearly...
By all means, brother, go ahead.
There's clearly something that's talking about that there has been a creation of microorganisms. And I think to make this not so spooky, we can just talk about the AIDS virus. That when you look at this virus and they have the geometry behind it, it's a tetrahedron and it's some geometry. It's not like you just seeing this gremlin looking thing, which you would kind of expect, right? So this means that there's now two types of i.e. viruses. There are man-made viruses, right? And then there's these organic viruses, or genetically organic viruses, right? But so when we go to the genetically organic virus, it looks like a gremlin. It looks like a monster. Like the teeth are all crazy and it's just all wild, right? And then when you understand the higher states of consciousness, you realize the only thing that's saying is lack of symmetry. And it's showing you that as you get higher into the stage of totality, you become symmetric. Symmetrics is just the same as harmonics. Okay, but when you're non-harmonic, which a parasite is, then you're all distorted and gremlin featured, right? Which is also in the geometry and the shape of something that is deformed, right? And then so that's why I guess it's so difficult to answer the question initially, is because first we have to separate the synthetics, or i.e. synthetics from the organics. Because then when you go to the synthetics, if you try to apply that same rule, meaning, non-symmetrics means that it's a virus, you'll find viruses like the A virus in a perfect tetrahedron. And then something else then applies there, which is the same thing we were explaining on the last show about what the buckyball is used for, what the carbon C60 discovery is really about, which is how do you encase this thing? Like what environment, and this is what you have to understand about medicine. Medicine is alive. But what the agent that is being transferred to you has to be transferred to you in a specific geometry that survives your system. Because other than that, if you drink a certain kind of virus, let's say, it could go in your system hostile to that virus and kills that virus. But if that virus is inside of a capsid, which is basically this shell that the virus puts around itself to protect itself, that capsid could be strong enough to go into your system and not to get broke down. So where is the real war taking place then? Because it sounds like I'm just explaining Baghdad to everyone right now, but it's going on inside, that there's this multiple wars. And so you can imagine even the lungs, which are kind of like more of a benevolent type creature, is inhaling this toxin and is looking basically in attempts for who to blame for the toxin that is having inhaled, that's killing it. So in a sense, if the entire body is trying to survive, it's always in chaos. So the same thing with the earth. If everyone is all just into this whole survival thing, how am I going to make it the next day? We're always going to remain in chaos. And that's why the cult of death, that's what it can cause when it gets distorted, because this is all comes about because people think that they're really dying. And then they think that because they don't have any communication with anyone that is dead. So there's a cause and a process. There's a process here. Where there's mice, there's cats. Where there's cats, there's dogs. So it's the same thing. This kind of process of thinking teaches us that this knowledge is saying some deeper stuff to us, that we can actually reverse the wheels of our decay here, and we can do it on multiple levels. And it involves, though, looking through the introspection, then looking at your life. And then what you're really doing, though, is you're figuring out which way you want to unhinge it, because this is like a clam. Once it latches around something, you kind of need to get it open again before you can. It's like a alligator's mouth. All these things are synonymous. You need to kind of get a grip on it, right? So that's why you're going to use a wedge. You use this triangle because now you can figure out, am I more in a position to deal with this mentally, spiritually, or physically? Because where is my strong point? Because last time I checked my node, and this is things that, again, it's just astrologically understanding yourself, you understand where your strong point is. So you'd be like, man, I can either vacuum this out or I can blow it away. Which one's going to be easier for me? And so this is like, if I know that in my environment, my corners are not tight. This means that basically things have gotten unorganized, and now I've come out of synchronization. This is a key thing. People need to understand that being in sync is also synonymous with being harmonic. So when you're synchronistic, you have to be organized. And organized starts on a physical level for most people, and just looking around you and looking at the objects and how they're pointed, and the symmetry that you're being able to feed back your mind in your own environment. Is there clothes on the floor? All these kind of things are important. And then check the corners, because this is still all about you. Like, it's not about somebody telling you you're doing something weird and hocus pocus. This is about astral hygiene. Like, you got to basically, like in the military, they say, let's do a top to bottom. Let's take a look at all this stuff, because we need to know everything that's here. And so that's when you take command of your life, because you need to know everything that's in your house. And when certain things went up missing, if they're under the couch, if they're inside of the couch, all that kind of stuff has got to come out. That's the real spring cleaning itself. But then when that happens, then you start coming back in synchronicity. It gets so tough, you may be thinking about something. You're like thinking about this word, and then maybe the TV's on or something, boom, the word comes off the TV. Everything starts to sync back up. Instead of definitely not wanting to be late, you're actually on time or a little bit early. Like, everything starts to run into that kind of synchronicity, and this is a way to cause that. So again, that's the physical way, looking at the environment, making sure that's tightened down. Not saying a person's a nasty person, but do check that. Like, sometimes we've become very good at making an organized mess. This is a funny phenomenon. Like, you know how you can kind of make everything kind of look clean because it's straightened up and things like that, but sometimes it's just like your tools and different things that you're using, how in order, and are those things in organization. So that's again,
trying
that's
to polish the turd, in other words.
For sure. Like, because you're checking bases. You just need to understand where the border is of your consciousness. It's like you station something there. So when you look at your whole castle, which is your home, you actually know where every single thing is. It's not, because this is what happens. How you come out of sync is when you're looking for something. Think about this. Like, how you come out of sync when you're looking for something, that 10 to 15 minutes. And I'm not saying that, again, you're not out of sync, but there's hundreds of people listening right now, and they're definitely like, okay, I see where it's at. Because I had this situation going on. So I know if I'm looking 10 minutes, 15 minutes for something, I'm like, man, where is, oh my goodness, this is crazy. Now I'm completely out of sync. Because first of all, what came out of sync? My frequency. Because when you're looking for something, you're going out now. You don't know where it is. Knowing where something is means it's inside, right? You can visualize it. You know exactly where it is. So when you don't know where it is, it's outside. So now here you come, alien out of the shell, climbing around the reality, lost. Because you don't know where you're looking for. So it's the same frequency. This is why I started seeing there was more simple ways to get into these higher frequencies, because even that lost frequency of just trying to find a screwdriver is no difference than trying to find the inner space. It's the same frequency, right? And the less of that frequency you have, the less of the current that you're actually burning up. That is the same stuff that you need for your thrust. So,
man, that helps a lot, brother. Because I mean, I was looking, just on the physical, and trying to, just attack these parasites. Because everybody has these. If you eat any flesh, and so I was just trying to attack them. Taking all this turmeric and cayenne and just trying to get the hell out of my body now. And it don't work like that. It don't work like that.
Right. Like, I mean, in the tens
around for a long time.
In the tens is like a war, and then it's like you ain't negotiating at all. And so and this is another thing that I was led to tell you, brother, like the probiotics, right, and the enzymes working in tandem with one another is a big key to keeping the bacteria management going on. Like I was just talking about, I'm still using this Astrozyme G, and it was amazing because the first thing that happened within 3 days is that my skin started peeling. And I was like, man, what's going on? Like, maybe I'm like, okay, is this like a reaction or something? But I just could notice that what was underneath it was a fresh layer of skin. And then I was like, but I recorded it because it was a very clear phenomenon. And then I was able to come to terms with it. And it's because when you introduce the enzymes into the body, And some people I noticed were buying Astrozyme 2 because it's twice the power, and that's just for people who have a really, really defunct digestive system. But if you have a decent enough digestive system, it's Astrozyme or Astrozyme G. I just wanted to make sure that's known. But the reality is also that with this enzymes, remember, these are the only living organisms. If you understand, they have energy. And there's only really two things that really create life, and that's protein, enzyme. And so if you get more of the enzyme, this means you got more of the guys that are on your side, or, not to genderize them, but you got more on your side that know how to deal with negative bacteria and toxins. And then the process in which they deal with it is they eat them. You see what I mean? So
I'm already on the sprouts, but I do need to get that.
Well, yeah, because do you know how many enzymes there are? Oh my goodness! Like when I looked at the gentleman's research from Astrozyme, and he's been doing this for 20 years. This dude is the seventh highest climber in the world. I was like, man, this is like music to my ears, and seeing just how much you can deal with the process of digestion. Because see, digestion becomes a big key when you get into the phase of dealing with monatomics and dealing with other substances, like even substances from nature that the body has long forgot and does not have the ability to truly extract or mine the core element from this particular substance. And so the enzyme has to get in there and basically convert it for you. It needs to eat it and then bring it back out in a stage that is assimilable for the body. So in this case, and I'll be very brief and done here. In this case, when the enzymes are working, then your organs don't have to do that work. And when they don't have to do that work, then they can actually have time to stay in harmony and then actually build up their frequency. And then when the frequency rises, there can't be any ailments. It's 100% a true thing. They can't even deny it, that when the frequency keeps going higher and higher, because the organ is actually becoming, where it can vibrate, then the negative energies, they break off. Like I'm sure if you saw it on a spiritual level, you would see just these barnacles and different things like that just cracking off of your surface, and then you giving off this very lustrous skin or lustrous shell around you.
Okay, and that leads me. That's perfect. That makes it crystal clear, and it leads me into my next question. I downloaded the app that you had referenced once before, My Noise, and I wanted to know in that app. I think you mentioned that there was isochondrics or the frequencies for your organs.
Right, the isochronic.
Is that in that app? Is that one?
Yeah, in the isochronic app. And I would also recommend a person do some research on isochronics and see if they can find like a really good isochronic generator, which I've seen is probably only running on like a PC. But basically, the isochronic is just a tone, so you just need something that can put out the isochronic tone. But if you want different variables, like if you want to start understanding the effects of one isochronic versus another, I think with My Noise, that site that I gave you actually only has about 8 different selections. And the main thing that they're good at is that they give you the entire scale. Because if you noticed on that site, there was also a lot of other things that they had a bunch of other things that you could different tones that you could play. And I found that many of those tones were also very effective, because you get overall that what you want to work with is you want to start to differentiate tones. And then that's where some of the last phase is actually getting familiar with your own tone and being able to kind of pull those tones apart, slow those tones down, speed them. Because if you can basically manipulate your own tone, you can change frequencies.
Right.
And then when you can do that, you could tap into anything and nothing. Like nothing is like the option that is generally grayed out. When you go in some kind of setting, and then there's one option grayed out, and then they tell you need to either unlock something or buy something in order to get that feature. Nothing is a feature that is definitely needed, but it's most of the time grayed out. And the reason why you need nothing is nothing allows charging in a rapid period of time. You know how the batteries, they have these supercharger things that you can use that charge rechargeable batteries faster, right? Nothing is like that. It's like you out of the cage. It's like watching this animal that you let out of the cage and it just takes off. And it's just gone, and running and running and running. And you're like, man, he was in that cage for a long time. That's what nothing, true nothing is like. It's not, sometimes people denote it as losing identity and all this kind of stuff. It's just another stage that you feel like you need some of, just like when, you're not getting that space around you as far as, people interacting with you all the time. You don't have even an hour or 2 hours to even collect yourself and to figure out, just where your balance is. So.
Yeah, it sounds like when I got out of jail a couple years ago, man.
For sure. I mean, definitely a frequency change going on.
That felt like nothing to me.
Oh, man, I was thinking that if they can bottle that feeling, it'd be priceless, because obviously anyone walking out of those doors has this feeling that is very difficult to get a hold of, because most people don't still find themselves in that position. But when freedom in itself, you start, man, I got addicted to that. I tell you, man, I got addicted to the feeling of freedom. And then I realized that that same feeling while inside seemed to be still present on outside. And then that's what really started waking me to another mass state of consciousness, because I was like, yeah, you're not. And then because you could even be more free in there if you understand how to really work with your mind.
For sure, because even though there is sex, there is a lot less division in there than there is outside.
For sure. I mean, there's less options.
Right, exactly.
Options equal division.
So, all right, brother.
All
man,
right.
So I appreciate your time.
Oh, man, definitely. It was great. I do appreciate you inspiring that message, and I'm going to go ahead and take the next call.
Okay, Sevan.
Okay,
Cool.
wholeness. All right, that was an awesome transmission again, just in getting clarity on certain things. I don't know, in the beginning, I was a little worked up, but, as we get more integral in it and just see in yourself, you just have to ask yourself, well, what's really going on with me? If someone asks you a question, sometimes you could be even outside of yourself trying to answer the question. And then when you get back inside of yourself and just say, well, what happened in my case? How did I see it? When did I come across that same point? And what did I do to remedy myself from it? In parasites, there's different kinds. Like there's just different kinds. And so that same method that I explained to the gentleman that was on the line about dealing with the reality and also, getting your space clean and that kind of thing, and dealing with, silver and dealing with the ultraviolet if you have the opportunity to, and, wiping things down. And that really does help in the environment to keep it harmonic and keep the frequency going. And this is just what you're telling the environment, is that if anything is here that doesn't want to participate in this high frequency, because this is certainly guided on it, then it has to go into an environment that is more harmonic for it. I need space. So understand the difference of what is actually happening. There's no separation between you and this so-called negative spirit or whatever. It just goes to a different space where it's more harmonic. And then that space that you're holding that is harmonic in your frequency remains there. And then there's also seems to be an exchange that's made. As that negative energy leaves, per se, then this other energy that corresponds to what you are comes. And this is the transfer that we're doing in our own energy centers, etc. And so I'm going to go ahead and take another caller here. Let's see. All right. So a caller from an unknown number. You are on Astral Quest. What's going on?
Aloha, brother.
Oh, good. What's up?
It's Mike here calling from Hawaii.
I know. How you feeling?
Yeah, just wonderful transmission. Tuning in with the heart, and I'm like, you ready for liftoff again? I'm not sure I'm ready to. As we were feeling it earlier, it's just, we're that close. And it's like when you talk about coming together, we're already together. So how closer can you get?
Exactly, and I think that's also why today is really synonymous for really that message, because, some people say, well, it's easy to say that, because that's obviously the rebuttal. It's easy to say that we're together, but we're fighting, we're warring. And then, but that we're is inside of their mind still. So it's basically like they're still fighting and warring. They're still to come to these levels of amends within themselves and start understanding the power within themselves and to get it working in a coordinated way. And so thus the reflection and the reality doesn't bear that same witness to, okay, well, wait a minute, let's check what it is versus what I am. And so I can understand and denote where I need to go and what I need to do with this. And that's the more mature phase. That's when one says that, okay, I'm ready to build this thing. It's going to really count what I do. So that's when the person's able to go back and say, okay, well, this is what I have not achieved. What I'm thinking is that I find some separation within myself by what I'm doing to myself. And this is the conflict of beating myself up and poisoning myself and eating the wrong things and, and treating people a different kind of way, regardless of what they've done to me, yelling at them, all these kind of things. Like, we have to be able to take account for it for ourselves and say, okay, I'm going to look for some resolutions. And this is where your brothers and sisters around you, and they're very innovative, because trust me, the highest system of transformation is able to take place without anyone even being conscious that is actually taking place, okay? And I want to explain that very simply here, that it was known that in the great halls of all the great teachers, let's just imagine that place, the one who was known to be the greatest teacher had a system that the disciple did not know that they were actually in some kind of course or in some kind of class or trying to do something to get some other result. Because it was already agreed in the great hall of teachers that doing such things would, in fact, affect the person's decisions, right? It's like if you tell a person, look, if you jump over that, then you'll get this. Then the person's going to just do this and then do that. So this is why so much is vague about this next stage of our consciousness, why it remains in this limitless area, because that's the only other thing there could be. There only could be our expansion, right? Or this. And then, so once one realizes where they are, that's called the awakening, right? And then this a massive awakening it's something that I'm just present personally for and elated about being involved in. But I see so many around me that are expanding in different stages in different ways. I realize that the worst thing that I would be able to do is to talk about what this expansion is exactly going to entail once it's done. And this is why I call it the day after ascension. Like, what is this thing going to really look like when we all come together? And I think that the main people who kind of can get a glimpse of that are the ones who know what it feels like to not be together. Meaning that, like, sometimes when or to have, actually even deeper than this, to have something or someone around you in a tense that is keeping you hidden or lowering you. You see, those people desire more and have a projection more for what it's like when we're all together, because they're yet to experience. It's kind of like being in jail. In jail, you would love to walk across the hall and walk up and get in the car and drive off, but that's all not possible. So you can't even really interact with anything. So it's the same thing in many of the stages of consciousness in the world, that their ability to interact not only with who they really are, but the beautiful nature and all these things that have been put around us has not even began yet. And this is why for those of us that it has began for, in my mind and in my heart, there was never a time that I did not remember that it was still people that it did not begin for. But what I did also do is that, and with a lot of other people, it's been a massive collective, is looking into the ways that we can bring such things about. And I believe that what everyone is doing now is we're all working in these different ways to bring about this massive connection between each other and to eliminate all the things that have been separating us. And
so here we are. And you tuned it right in, and I'm so, like, it's just the thrust is here, and it's not the thrusting that we get out of balance with in the so-called lower chakra. This is the truth to us. When we're dreaming truth, this is what we're doing. That's what you're describing. And the last layer of fear, of the atmosphere that we have that is being cleared, is the skin, this interface.
That's crazy right there. I love that.
And with that, this is how the heart. It's so yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to add words to this at the moment.
All right, brother. Well, let somebody else get in here in the call, and then we'll keep floating it.
So just what is skin? Can you open up about this?
Oh my goodness, man! Like I was just thinking about skin like 3 days ago, and man, and even the person that I was talking about this, which was Jason, I'm sure that he'll probably listen to this at some point. And then we were talking about, so it actually comes down at a certain point. We were in the conversation where it comes down to the skin and what what connection the skin has with all of this. And I remember this. Let me see if I can pull this. I remember because I had think that the skin is attached to first the dream or the derma, right? But then it was a deeper insight that I actually pulled, and it's probably on this computer. So hold on real quick for me, because I had a notation, and it's probably in here. Here it is, right here. Bam! Look. Okay, so here it is. Skin and the snake. Okay, because I would advise everyone to think of the zoomorphication and the power of different entities and what they stand for. So I just really want to read this. Because it was an etymological breakdown, and I'm going to put this on the big screen. Let me see this here that I would have to.
This is so awesome, Sevan. No. Please tune in with me. I'm, on the platform, doing it 4 a.m. here in that between time, that interface of the Vastface and the Clearface. Tune in with me, brother. We're going to be there 4 a.m. in the morning here. We're bringing this home. We're home. Thank you.
No doubt, brother. No doubt. I'm going to also, and I'm going to smooth that in right now. Everyone should be able to see my screen in whole. I want to read this because, it had some deep knowledge in it, and then it was still years ago that I looked at this, but it says, the skin is, it says seikin, or a knife, and I'm trying to enlarge this a little bit here. Showing the cognates of the skin. There's obviously got to be something in here. So let me go to this. Let's see if I can get that so everybody can see that. Okay, so it says here that that basically the skin is seikin, or skin in Hebrew, in French katu, or cutaneous, and this automatically kind of evokes to me the cut is the skin. The skin is actually what's holding not only things in, but it's also the wall itself, right? Like, if you think of everything that is inside the body is walled in by the skin. So in a sense, the skin would be the cut. It also says skin in Chinese is actually pi. Interesting. Our first set of homonymies related skin and light, while this second set relates skin to the action of cutting. What kind of skin can cut like a knife and at the same time shine like a light? The answer is obvious when we remember that language always refers to man. The fingernail is the only part of the human body that fulfills all of these conditions. It is an extension of the skin. It shines and it cuts like a knife. Nails constitute the exact gravitational center of the above square units. They are also the one part of our skin that we have in common with the fish and with reptiles. Fish scales are indeed the equivalent of human nails. They are veritable coatings, skin of small knives that reflect light. Japanese confirms that in the land of the rising sun, fish is sakana, a homonym of the English skin, as well as the Hebrew sakin, the knife. The serpent is a reptilian creature which represents one of the transitions from aquatic to land mammals. This fish reptile continuity appears in language in the form of numerous homonymies that relate fish to snakes and both of this animals to man. The English snake and serpent both integrate perfectly into the above knife fish skin. And there's about 5 excerpts here, which I'm not going to completely read, but I know someone's probably going to request this and want these, so I will furnish them to you. But it clearly shows that there is some kind of connection here, or not just some kind of connection between serpents, between cutting, the knife, skin, and these kind of derivatives. Even here it says the link between serpents and knives appears in the Latin serp, or sickle, or scythe, the cutting instrument par excellence, which corresponds to serpent. In Italian, serpent is serpi, making this word an exact homonym of the Latin serpi, or sickle, and the Hebrew seraph, a poisonous snake, an obvious English patent in the word sharp, one common to fangs and sickles. Okay, so what I could definitely elaborate on that for a great deal, but I'm going to choose not to at this time not to avoid going into the reptilian side. And we're going to be finishing things off here. It's about 11:30 my time, so we've gotten a lot of information in today. kind of quite odd transmission to me today, meaning that I I'm working with the energies today. A lot of stuff's coming through, but there's also this side of me that has developed more and more, which is more of in tune and more silent about the situation, as far as getting very long in the verbiage of the cutting of the language and the dividing of the worlds by explaining the dragon mother or the drama that existed after the Big Bang. But instead going right to that point of origin and then going right through that point. And then that gives us the connection between Alpha and Omega. And indeed, the beginning marries the end, and thus the concepts of a beginning and an end are done with all together. And this brings you back to your original phase, i.e. Clearface, which is perpetual, a being that has no fears, no preloaded programs. And that's the explanation of today's, just levels of knowledge that we're able to give. So there doesn't appear to be any more calls right now. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take this time to say thanks to everyone that's been involved in the network, and also those who've been involved with us just on the ground, getting information to other people, all the people who've been commenting. I mean, there's been some amazing comments on some of the stuff that or all of the stuff that's been really produced. And that's really allowed us here to keep pushing very hard at bringing consciousness. I will say that it's been, even for me, for this last week, 2 weeks, super busy, like it's nonstop. And then like I even got in here today and, it took about an hour and a half to get everything set up. And then 10 minutes before the show, all the power cuts off. So that means I had to reset things. So I do want to let everyone know that I'm still doing the best that I can, considering the message and what's being delivered. Because what happens is that this comes about through experience. So I have to actually go through the things that I'm speaking of, and I have to have that interact with me in life in some way or another. And it's been quite interesting, because you would think that even if you were completely secluded from most people in the reality, you would still, well, in this case, I'm not from Costa Rica, so I would assume that I would not run into as many people or run into as many synchronicities as I would somewhere else. But that's in fact not true. That that every place that you go, when you are synchronistically inclined, you find the individuals that are harmonic to where you're looking to go next. And so that's just what I want to say to everyone, is thank you for inspiring me to continue this. And I'm going to continue to go on indefinitely, meaning that through no limits, we will eventually get to one point where we all will be together, and that there will be a massive transmission that we will all share, and there will be no conflicts with it, because everyone will be fully aware of what it is. And that's just the knowledge that all is self, and that we're here in this experience really to enjoy things. And when we remove disharmonic states from our consciousness, when we remove the parasites or the distortions, that's when we get to the symmetry of harmony. And then that's where we're able to introduce anything that is not on that stage, that ability. And in that we become its teacher. And thus we also have a purpose. So wholeness and balance vibration to everyone, and thank you.